Welcome, everyone, to this free Venus Wisdom class, take two. And I'm excited to share with you why I feel that these codes and this map of Venus in her cycle with the sun is so important for us right now. My name is Sasha Rose. If you don't know me, the first thing that I want to do is I want to play this song that beautifully articulates the heroine's journey. And I want to invite you to close your eyes and to listen and to see how it moves you and how you have related to this in your own life. Here we go.
Let my gardens speak for me when I am gone. Let them speak in colored whispers of all the beauty I have seen and felt and lived. Let them speak of how much death had defined me, how many hard seasons it took to make me a living, breathing thing. Let them speak of my seasons of growth and abundance, but let them also tell of my seasons of loss and decay. Let the soft, wet earth be a reminder of hardness that didn't win, of sadness that didn't calcify, of surrender that triumphed over resistance. And let the glorious, fragrant blooms speak of my life and its greatest lesson, that the beauty we make never dies. Come sit by my garden.
So Come Sit by My Garden, that's by Emery Hall, and is a beautiful articulation of that deepening. And to me, that is the heroine's journey. And whether or not we've ever connected with the Venus cycle as a way to amplify our own heroine's journey or mark our own heroine's journey, it is a process that we're all familiar with. We know how those seasons of death have arrived, and the way that we have met them has deepened us. And of course, this used to be something that was a part of our culture when we had initiations in these thresholds between seasons, between ages. And this is something that has largely been lost. And I feel like this is another reason that syncing with Venus and tuning into this ancient cycle can really support us right now, because it brings us into that remembrance of the death that we enter into in life that are not physical death until we do, but that really change us, and what is released and what is let go of in those times, that there is then blossoming on the other side. Now we see this with the seasons, and it has become much more common that there's a conversation around the seasonal turnings and the way that we're moving with the season. There's a real return to and longing for our indigenous remembering around the seasonal energies. And is it a season of blossoming? Is it a season of decay? And so right now in this moment in the Northern Hemisphere, we're entering into that period that is marked as that cross-quarter holiday of Lammas. And it's the beginning of the end of summer for us. And right now we can feel that in that it's staying light so long, it's hot, we're in the heat of summer. And then as we pass through that threshold, we'll start to notice the waning. The sun is setting earlier and earlier, and that season is changing, and it's coming into a harvest after the peak of the fruit of the food. Of course, when we were living close to the earth, these kind of seasonal turnings had huge implications as far as our nourishment and how we were going to live through the seasons of the darkness and the seasons of the cold. So the thing that is so interesting about this moment is that we're in that seasonal turning in the Northern Hemisphere. In the Southern Hemisphere, of course, it's the opposite. And I had a beautiful session with a sister yesterday. She had on her gloves and she was freezing. She was in Australia because they're in a completely different seasonal turning. And that is one of the challenges of using the Western astrology system that comes from the Greeks. It's all calibrated to the Northern Hemisphere. And so there's something that I think is very special in the Venus cycle because it's its own cycle of birth, like spring, of the descent that happens as we go into the deep times and the shedding, like the leaves on the tree shed, and then that deep underworld time of the winter, and then the re-emergence that happens on the other side of that, and that ascent and that first sign of spring, and we start to see the green shoots and then the coming forth. So Venus in her cycle with the sun has that natural movement, and it doesn't always match the seasons because it's an independent cycle. And I feel like that's one of the ways that the Venus cycle is a bit of a renegade. And she's actually calling us to break time, to break the constraints of time, that if we're seasonally married to a certain way of looking at those energetics, well, if we move to another hemisphere, that's going to change. But the Venus cycle is going to be the same for everyone, wherever they are. All the women that are on Earth, we are the Earth. That is the first sign that Venus rules is Taurus, our bodies, our senses, our fertility, our ability to bring forth life. And so she's really showing us that with our connection to the Earth, with the connection to our own embodied experience of being women that can actually tap into that black hole, that mystery within us, and bring forth life, and that we can also bring forth worlds as we are coming into a time when that's more important, that we remember our ability to do that. And so that season of deepening into who we are and then re-emerging on the other side of that initiation of that dark time, it's very connected to the that same arc of a journey of the seasons. And yet in the Venus cycle, we have this alternative to the seasonal orientation that we can tune into. In this particular cycle, we have a lot of resonance between what Venus is doing in her cycle with the sun and the seasonal cycle. And that happens every 8 years. Because every 8 years, Venus meets the sun right around the time of the spring equinox. And so she's beginning her life, that creative burst of spring energy at the springtime. They're together. And so then when she goes through her descent, and the deepening into winter, that happens to coincide in the Northern Hemisphere with winter. So we had that secret meeting with the sun, that halfway point through her cycle this last January. And that was the deep of the deep, both in the Venus cycle and in the deep winter in the Northern Hemisphere. And now we're having this ascent where she is coming to the peak of her cycle, where she'll be highest and brightest in the evening sky. And so we get to experience a bit of an opposite energy than the seasonal energy of, our season's going to keep going down, down, down in the Northern Hemisphere into the shedding, but Venus is rising brighter. And so I feel like it gives us another orientation. She's our cosmic sister in the sky, and she's reflecting our own brilliance, our own creative power back to us. And so the second sign that she rules is Libra, which is about air, which is about that spaciousness, self and other in relationship. So she's showing us not only how to deepen into the sensual and organic and fertile nature that we are as human women on the earth of the earth, but also that reflection from the cosmic above that is more spacious and less subjective. And the power of the mirroring is something that we know from intimate relationships, that they bring it all of our own unhealed personal, whatever it is, it can bring it to the surface because we love. And that love itself is purifying and showing us the places within us where we're still holding on to something that is dysfunctional. And so this is the power that we're tapping into here, the power of the life, the birth, the creation, and then the way that we move with that naturally. When we want to create something in our life, we're aligning with that energy. And then there's a process. It's not like we want to create a business and suddenly we have a business, or we want to create a painting and then suddenly we have a painting. There's a process of coming up against the obstacles, coming up against the distortions and the inversions and the challenges of this realm in its current form. That is that descent process where we're changed by the struggle, by the losses, by things not going the way that we wish they had. And that's called the trials and tribulation part of her cycle. Now, this cycle is so ancient, and it has so many implications across so many different traditions. From the first story, the Babylonian story encoded on clay tablets of Inanna, and to the Egyptian story, and of Isis and Osiris, and then to Jesus's story, we can see, and Demeter and Persephone with the Greeks, we can see all of these threads that when you have been studying and moving with the Venus cycle, you see the themes coming up again and again. And that is illuminating and helpful. And also, it's not something that we then need to create, add on more to what we are and what we believe because of that. I think there's a way that in this current moment, with the way that New Age women's spirituality has become so popular, that there's a lot of adding on of identities. And so I just want to say that I don't feel that that is actually the invitation with the Venus cycle. So I think women new to this can discover the Venus cycle and have that aha, oh, wow, this is mirroring Inanna's journey. Now I'm going to worship Inanna. Now I'm going to be Inanna. Now I'm going to start a whole religion about Inanna. I actually saw this happen with a friend of mine. And then now she is channeling Inanna and feels like, she's creating her own new religion. I don't actually feel in the 14 years of this process of syncing with Venus, what I call syncing with Venus, I don't feel that that's the invitation necessarily. And of course, everyone needs to have their own journey and their own path. But when I see that, I think, okay, there's going to need to be more shedding probably at some point for those identities that got taken on. Because this path of the feminine, it's not about wearing certain clothes. It's not about wearing certain anything. It's not about implements or about how you look in any way. It's a deeply, deeply inner journey. And that gets really, really tricky in a culture that suddenly everything is performing for the camera. And so this deep inner journey is being documented and, what do you call that? Staged, let's make sure the candle's there and this is there and this looks good. And there's, to me, a dissonance in that trend to be sharing the deep inner journey in a way that is so external and with so many layers. So I want to share a little bit more about what this journey, how it has served me, and knowing my codes has served me on my path, because I firmly believe that this journey and this process of syncing with Venus is an amplification for us in our own heroine's journey. It amplifies what we're trying to discover about the truth of who we are. And we're the only one that can do that. And so it's been very challenging for me to come out with some of what I've discovered after 14 years of stripping and releasing my spiritual identities. I've been through that process for a long time, again and again and again. And so coming out the other side and sharing revelations is tricky. It sometimes doesn't work, because when I say I no longer orient to the moon, and I don't feel like that cycle is actually supportive of our evolution, then you're going to come up against beliefs. And this is not something that anyone can share or convince anyone of, right? Just like any kind of religious or philosophical belief. We don't change because of belief. We change because of our own inner experience. And what I've found so helpful about this journey is it's really given me a language for that inner process that I've been through, to really be inside different spiritual traditions in a good way. I feel that most are coming into that desire for a spiritual connection with something vaster, and to understand the questions of who are we, how did we get in a realm that operates like this, what was this fall, and how do we restore ourselves to our original nature. These kind of questions are really powerful. And so I really want to honor everyone's path and say that you don't need to agree with me or the conclusions that I've come to on my journey. This is really for your own wisdom to reveal itself to you. And because we're at such an urgent moment, I do feel inspired to share some of the insights that I've had, lived wisdom from this process of deconditioning myself from spiritual teachings. And I've been in a lot of them, and I grew up in this realm of spiritual aspiration. And so, sorry, kind of lost my thought. So let me take a moment. Come back. So what I'm doing right now is I'm really working with the code of my Libra energy. And so that's coming back to center. And so maybe because I'm doing that, I'll actually invite all of us to do that. So that sword that we see associated with the Libra, the woman holding the sword, or, sometimes it's also the balance. So we're balancing in two ways. To me, that is really that spinal column, in the way that when our energy is centered, we have a different perspective. And so it's less leaned forward into engagement with and being affected by others. It's really pulling into that center place to experience oneself fully and then be in relationship with others. But as women, oftentimes we get entangled. So let's all take a moment, come into your center, come into that place right in front of your spine, and just allow that to be effort and cool. The Libra energy is cool, and there's a grace to it. So connecting with your own sense of grace as you come into that cooler, centered place and rebalance. And we do this again and again and again throughout the day, throughout our lives. So this journey is calling us to live from our own wisdom more and more, and to reference that. And I had it again and it left. It's being so tricky, that thought. So in our quest to understand spiritually and to have a place to share this devotion that we as women feel, this longing for that connection with the sacred feminine, the Venus cycle can really support us to cultivate that within ourselves in our own unique way. So feel free to, as you've centered, to also, come back into the room and see what that feels like to be in your own center, and then to also witness the other energies, the other, some of us are very sensitive. You don't even have to see it. You can feel it, right? And so to hold oneself while engaging with other is really the Libra medicine, which is very, very correlated with the part of the cycle that we're in right now, which is the evening star phase. That coming out from the underworld with new authenticity, because we were vulnerable, because we were willing to let go, and then to feel our own sovereignty and see who are our kindred spirits that resonate with who I am, the uniqueness that I found with the truth that I found. So in our last conversation, someone was asking me last week, how do we find those kindred spirits? And I had said something about purpose, that I think there's a commonality of purpose. And as I thought about it between then and now, I realized I don't actually think that that's it. I think we can, many of our purposes are complementary, but they're not the same. I think it's more about the level of truth that we're resonating at. Because what we'll see as we go through that journey of shedding, like what I believe now is very different than what I believed 5 years ago, as for you. As we move through this process of the heroine's journey, to keep calibrating to the truth of who we are and letting what is not true fall away, that we actually become clearer and clearer in that sovereignty, in that sovereign quality of who we are. And it can become lonelier and lonelier, because you look around and there's less and less people that agree with you and that say, yeah, I totally feel that too. And oftentimes you'll find people that react to you when you share truth as you get more and more refined in this process. And I don't see it as a better than at all, but you can really recognize when another woman has been in a deep dive, she keeps going into the underworld and keeps releasing at a deeper level, and then comes out the other side changed forever. And then there's no going back, really. Once you start to wake up to what this realm is in its current form and how inverted it is, you can't unsee it. And it is not easy, because it is a lot. It's not just like a little bit inverted or a little bit distorted. It's a lot. And so there's a lot of readjustment around who we've followed, who we've admired, what we think is true and good about the world, when we recognize the inversion. But that original balance is Eden. And I love that that song said, come sit in my garden. You know, that's the Eden, that remembering of being a soul in an environment that was in balance, that was natural, that was true. And it feels like that is the ancient remembering that we're bringing forth as we move between ages, leaving the age of Pisces and entering the age of Aquarius. We're bringing that remembrance of that truth into the next era. And to me, that feels like that's part of this feminine alchemy, that we have the ability within our bodies to transmute the pain and the suffering and bring it back, to bring ourselves back to wholeness through the power of our own love. It's all about the love, and yet there's an architecture to it that when you start to see it and follow it, that you recognize the power of it, because that's what the new age often tries. It's all about love. Just do the love. Don't look at the dark. Don't look at the negative. Don't be in low frequency. Just bypass all that. Let's just be in love. It's all about the love. But that doesn't work, because we need the descent to the truth to be able to awaken to the corruption, to be able to create something different. So this is powerful. This is a powerful time. This is a powerful cycle for each and every woman. And that's why I really did a big call for this particular class, because whether or not you choose to work with me in a deeper way, this is really a time, if you feel a resonance with Venus, to lean in and to lean into the lived wisdom that I have gleaned from this 14-year journey. Oh, that's the thought that I was forgetting before. You know, we have all these arguments with our head, because another component of this reality that we're in is we don't honor lived wisdom. We don't honor the elders. And we used to sit around and share stories. You know, oh, I tried that. I had this experience. These were the results. And that becomes a story that becomes coded into the culture, so that the younger people don't also have to go through that exact, they have a warning. They have a shortcut to the wisdom if they choose to take it. Oh, okay, that story taught that. Maybe I'm not going to go do that exact thing and fall down that same hole, right? So we're also honoring that lived wisdom through this cycle after cycle of these 19 months of our own deepening, and then our own personal Venus returns to that same sign that we're born into every 8 years. So we get that major Venus return. We get that major opportunity to align with the truth of who we are. So currently, right now we're in a Venus and Pisces cycle that started March 22nd of 2025. And that will be ending October 23rd of 2026. And we're starting to come into that home stretch. I'm really feeling the culmination energy. And so that's why I'm like, hey, lean in. If you're interested in Venus, lean in. If you have learned about the Venus cycle from a man and from a map that was made from a man, you may want to consider connecting with what I have discovered through my lived wisdom, because I did not discover this through any books. I did start out with connecting with a man who is teaching on the Venus cycle, who unfortunately is still teaching on the Venus cycle. And I have recently come out about him and his corruption. But even men that are not corrupted don't, in my view, have that access to the feminine mysteries and really need to move aside. So I'm not saying that I'm the only one doing this. I just haven't met another woman who has become so intimate with the Venus cycle over 14 years, connected that to her lived experience, and wasn't trying to map something from someone else, you know. And if you know of women like that, please introduce me. I would love to meet them. But I have in my codes also, I do have Scorpio. It's not my Venus, which is a total revelation. It's my sun. So I do have that more obsessive quality. So the way that I do things can be, you know, it can have that intense quality of really, I've stayed with this. I've really stayed with this as a pulse, as a heartbeat, as a daily contemplation, as a nature connection, going outside, sitting on the land, viewing and receiving. So I've been in this intimacy. And when I meet women who are really in their deeper wisdom, they often, without knowing the cycle, are moving with the cycle in the themes and in the themes of what they're doing. And so one of the things that I wanted to do, and I'm going to do, is to bring on a woman who really inspired me in this cycle, because she's that kind of woman. She didn't know the astrology and she wasn't tracking it consciously. But the message that she was sending, she creates content, and she has a very high level of truth. I resonate with her truth, which is, you know, she's on that edge of the more Aquarian, like, okay, not everyone's ready for this, but here we are. Yeah. Did you come to that realization? Yep. That one. Yep. You know, been through that journey. And in this cycle, before I switched to the sidereal, the tropical zodiac would call this a Venus and Aries cycle. And as I've shared, I was going full Aries, new starts, new beginnings, bold moves, moving across the country, all these things, which were not working out. And as I'm doing that, I'm watching her content talk about the great emptying and the cosmic miscarrying and the letting go and the not knowing. And I was like starting to see how that expression was more true to this moment. And it's one of the threads that pointed me to the sidereal zodiac to understand this is a Pisces cycle. This is the last cycle. We're in a Pisces cycle where Venus is exalted and we're ending a Pisces age. So if we want to bring forth the beauty of the Venus and Pisces, you know, Venus and Pisces brings us to the beauty, and the age of Pisces, all of the distortion of that is ending. And there's a lot of confusion, delusion, addiction, orientation to power outside of ourselves, guru worship, cults that are all being exposed, but have been here in some form or the other, you know, this whole age, but we're seeing it all now. So we're getting, in a sense, the worst of Pisces in this cycle, Venus and Pisces. We get to move with the energetic invitation of the best of Pisces. How are we going to transmute that corruption and that suffering and let go and let go and let go and just keep letting go? Just keep letting go in the not knowing. And it is not comfortable. Is there anyone who's comfortable right now and their life's just on track and they feel like they're winning? I don't meet many women, even women that have been in a lot of topside world success, are really starting to articulate in the collective that there is a difficulty because the old world is dying. And it has been dying for some time, but now it's much more obvious. And so this is what the heroine's journey strengthens us to sustain. It strengthens us to sustain a change of ages where most everything that we knew is falling away all at once, to not be overwhelmed, to stay resourced, to stay true to ourselves, to not fall into the pit of fear, a very shadow Pisces experience, the nightmare of it, and to stay calibrated to the truth of who we are as beings of love. It's a very powerful resource right now. So I want to encourage you to lean in to Venus wisdom in whatever way is right for you. And I trust whatever that is. But if you have been on the outskirts for some time and you've been on different paths, I hope this is a breath of fresh air. That's what I've heard feedback in the spiritual world, that what I share is a breath of fresh air, because I'm quite genuine. And I'm taking off the masks of being a professional, anything. And because trying to do Venus wisdom as a business while my whole life was being undone really undid me having a business, that my whole marketing strategy now is just radical transparency and invitation to engage with this body of work that I feel is so powerful and so beautiful and so helpful for this time. I can't get inside other women's heads and think of the words to say that are going to solve their problem that they're having. Well, gosh, I have tried that whole marketing strategy of like psychologically profiling women and what they need. And, I just don't know. If you are called to the deep of who you are, then this journey is going to help you discover more of that. But there's no way that I can know what that is for you. And I've discovered that it is less of us that want to intentionally embark on the descent, because the descent is not fun. It's uncomfortable. It's confronting. And some part of us will die in order to be reborn. And so if you feel resonance with what I'm sharing, even if you don't understand some of what I'm going to share, the astrology of it, then this is for you. It's the resonance in your body. So already we're coming into, how does that even happen? My time tracking. I may go over a little bit more, but this piece that I wanted to say is that knowing your codes is so supportive. And that does take some time. I can sit down with a woman and just reflect those to her very quickly. And knowing the Venus cycle, the mechanics of it, is very helpful. And it doesn't matter what zodiac you use. We can sync with Venus without any signs if we wish. We're still going to have the heroine's journey of the burst of life, the descent through the trials and tribulations, the deepening in the underworld, and the reemergence as a more initiated sovereign woman who's showing up in service to the world and finding others who resonate. And then it starts again. So you don't need to be working with the sidereal zodiac to work with me. But I do feel like it's an invitation from this lived wisdom that if you want a shortcut to more clarity, every single woman that I sit with and turn her on to her astrology and the sidereal is wowed, and it makes so much more sense. Now, are we going to worship the sidereal zodiac now? I wouldn't recommend it. A beginner astrologer might be like, well, which house system should I use, and which zodiac should I use? And the master who has used the astrology to go beyond the astrology is going to say, just choose one. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, because you're going to give them all up. The major revelation, which is pretty hard sell in this marketplace, is astrology is part of the matrix. Is it helpful to know what cards you were dealt? Abso-fucking-lutely. For me, who has had a persistently challenging life, to know the dynamics in my chart is very helpful, because ultimately that's part of moving into our feminine alchemy, is that the matrix doesn't affect us anymore. But do we want to know what's the good, the bad, and the ugly that we were dealt? Because we were dealt it, in a sense. That's why sidereal astrology works so well. A really good sidereal astrologer, as I've said, can help you find your card keys. How? Where is the free will in a system that can pinpoint, you're going to get married here, you're going to do this here? So part of that alchemy is to claim our own sovereignty from the astrology itself, but it is incredibly helpful to know what those codes are in that journey, but be ready to give it all up. What do they say? If you see the Buddha on the road, kill him, right? Any kind of external reliance on wisdom other than our own wisdom, other than the original creator energy, whatever you want to call that, that's different. So I feel that the heart is where we connect with that energy of God, of, you know, the Most High, of the cosmic mother, however we hold that mystery that cannot be even understood, we connect through it through the heart, and the heart is Venus. The mind is Mercury, the heart is Venus, and the body is Venus in a reflection, you know. And so what will we do with those reflections? We can refine ourselves to connect with more of the truth of who we are. So when I had this awakening when I was 21 years old, quite young, where I understood at a visceral body level, I didn't understand it with my head. I experienced for 3 months the truth of who I was as a being of love. And it was like being altered. I was altered. It was an incredible experience. And at that time, I really felt a kinship with Jesus. I was like, oh, yeah, this is what Jesus was about. Like, I got it, you know, after being raised in a New Age Christian religion that talked about Jesus, but, you know, they had their own spin on everything. But there's something about Jesus, Yeshua, that archetype that is very much connected to the age of Pisces, the age that we're coming into culmination with, and the kind of energy of unconditional love that is available, especially through this cycle, because it's a Venus and Pisces cycle. And that there's a way that now we're seeing like all this reemergence of women that have been in the New Age returning to Christianity or going to Christianity at this time, and a huge resurgence in, or not even a resurgence, but interest in the Mary Magdalene mysteries. You know, this disciple of Jesus's or Yeshua's, you know, it's become a whole experience that a lot of people are having, which I find quite interesting as we're closing out this age of Pisces. And it is said to be the time that Jesus is going to return, whatever that means. So there's a lot of correlation here, whatever, you know, a lot of us have been traumatized by Christianity. So there's a whole way of how do we find our way to that unconditional compassion that Jesus represented. And even if we don't identify with that religion, you know, even if we've been harmed in some way by the incredible distortion of that religion, all religions, from my view, have some level of distortion as well as some level of truth. So it's a time to be even more discerning before we take on another layer, another identity, another spiritual identity. And before we connect with entities that we do not understand fully, may not understand, and they may not be who they say they are. So I think it's very interesting just looking at that particular moment and interest in Mary Magdalene and Jesus, although a lot of women feel more, I think, connected to Mary Magdalene than Jesus. So, you know, there's a lot of distortion there too, with women connecting with who knows what, but something outside that tradition as it was taught, we could say. But I do think it's very interesting that we know that the 7 demons were removed from Mary Magdalene, even though they're not named. And when Venus is in her cycle, she has usually seven visible gates of descent where she meets the moon. And so are those demons, whatever those demons represent, you know, in Buddhism, they call it, again, each tradition has a way of talking about like not necessarily demons, but the faults, the traps of this existence. How are we shedding those demons? And then when we're in the underworld, how intimate are we becoming with God, with the original source energy? How pure are we able to be? And then when we come out the other side, you know, I think it's really interesting. I haven't had a lot of time to study this, but I wrote them down. But then, you know, there's the 7 powers, and I don't know, maybe something here. I thought I wrote them down. Yeah. That Mary Magdalene also talks about, which I'm not going to find probably easily. No, but you can look them up. But I think it's really interesting that the first one is darkness. And that feels to me like that is alluding to the underworld of being in the darkness, being in the richness of having been stripped of the demons and being available for something truly new. Okay, so Devin is chiming in here, and she's in a deep, deep study of religion right now, divinity. So Jesus, the great restorer, Mary, walker of the talk, with eyes to see, ears to hear, understanding to understand. Right, she was the receiver of this beautiful, beautiful wisdom. Thank you for that, Devin. That was poetic. So isn't this interesting, that we're in this Pisces time, which is, the fish is connected to Christianity, Pisces is connected to Jesus, and there's this draw to those teachings in particular, and that we all have to find what is our faith? Well, ultimately, what do we have faith in? And how is that holding us? Because my sense is it's going to get rockier before we see the golden age dawn, and that we're the ones that are going to birth that. So how are we going to take care of ourselves? How are we going to stay resourced as we move through this eye of the storm? And I would propose that not just syncing with Venus solo, although that's lovely, but being in community in whatever way you are drawn to, whether that's, at the very base level, free Substack. So you're getting some content, you're getting some reminder, and you're not completely distracted from it. Or, the $13 a month, and we're having monthly gatherings and you can ask questions and engage more. Or I've been inspired to create a group experience that will be starting in August to come together and to really have some personal time with me, but also be in a group, because that's what we're moving towards in the next cycle, are these powerful equal partnerships. And if you know my story, a bit of my story, I kind of went off a little bit in the last class about my story. I have had so many betrayals of sisterhood in this very vulnerable time when I was questing to find a new place to live and be with land, be on land, be a part of that new paradigm of creating food sovereignty and just living on the land, living closer to nature, living with animals. So I had a lot of beautiful experiences on land, farming, taking care of many animals. And yet there was a lot of betrayal and lack of care. So the new paradigm is the codes of care and caring for each other, caring for self first, so not sacrificing. That's the shadow of Pisces, the deep shadow. And that's what we've been programmed to do, sacrifice. So, and I did so much of that in both of my marriages. I'm married twice. I just saw how that just kicked in. Nobody told me, like, Sasha, you have to sacrifice yourself. It wasn't conscious, but we can really default to that. So that claiming of who we are, not willing to sacrifice, but then really opening to this intimacy of sharing wisdom. I see that 5-pointed star as a weaving of wisdom, that beautiful image that we see, which is the cycles. So this is our current Venus stars updated to the sidereal zodiac. And so we are moving in this Pisces cycle into the Libra cycle, October 23rd. We're moving from the great letting go, the surrender, into compassion for others without sacrificing ourselves, the attunement to the collective suffering and those who are suffering the most, the children who are being abused, the satanic ritual abuse that we're starting to understand is so prevalent in this realm. As Ali Carter says, you don't live in the world that you think you live in. Well, we need to know that. We need to hold those beings in compassion. This is the access point in this cycle. And you can see this is number 4 in a greater 8-year cycle that began in, lo and behold, summer of 2020. This current 8-year cycle began during the pandemic, during the greatest psyop that we all lived through. So this is showing us that what we learned through that, because that was a real sorting process, wasn't it? Of being able to trust our own wisdom above what was being shouted at us from the culture and from the propaganda and from probably, those that we were connected to. My family disowned me during COVID. They're all still alive, but we're not in touch anymore because they couldn't, even though they were the OG hippies, the counterculture, they couldn't move through the propaganda. And so they've thought that I was wrong for not doing what Bill Gates said. And that was too much for them. So that was a huge sorting. Whatever you chose, I know people that did choose it in the moment and then later realized that was not a great idea, for their own health, for their own well-being. But this is the kind of initiation process that we need to wake up to that wisdom within, so that we can really know what's right for us in the moment under great pressure from external. So this whole cycle is a movement of what wisdom did we cultivate since that moment. Oops, I'm making screen share so you're all seeing. Sorry about that. Some of you were, I think, visible in the video. I just turned it off. So we've been through a journey. We're coming into the home stretch. The Pisces cycle that we're currently in, if you've never connected to Venus before, if you're just on the brink of sensing that maybe you've taken on more false identities, or maybe the identities you've been in are not feeling authentic anymore, you're detecting something is dissonant, you have such an opportunity in this cycle, no matter what your native cycle is, between now and especially October 3rd, when she goes retrograde, to shed, release, let go, held in such beauty. There's such beauty in this Pisces energy. There's such softness. There's such love. So nothing wrong. I mean, that's why so many are touched by the story of Jesus, is that he didn't leave anyone out. He wasn't in some kind of hierarchical position of, I have a spiritual authority and I know more. He hung out with everyone and met them where they were at. Not hung out, but he connected with everyone without moving from what was the wisdom that he was sharing. So you have a beautiful opportunity to tune in and let go in connection with other women. So that Venus cycle connects us. It doesn't matter what hemisphere you're in. Venus is still the evening star. The cycle's still the same. And so it feels like there's something about this cycle. And when women are connected through this cycle, when we're syncing through this cycle, we're watching Venus, we're looking for those insights because we're contemplating the themes. This isn't just about getting information. It's really about a living contemplation, a relationship with the living sky, the land where you live, and your own heart and how it's moved. And this longing for this unity that has become harder and harder to find, even within our own families. I connected after so many disruptions in the community that I was in during COVID. Then I connected with the freedom community, the people that were standing up for medical freedom. And there was a lot of discord there too. It wasn't just like, oh, we agree on this. There was a lot of infighting. There was just a lot of the imbalance of whatever that is that keeps us from working together, because that's what the powers that have been are banking on, and what they've banked on for forever that we know of, for our written history, is the way that they divide us. They're able to divide us because we as human beings, we have a natural goodness, and we have a certain naivete that gets preyed upon, a certain innocence. And so, this coming together in unity of love, of the feminine revered, of the power of the feminine, of the honoring of the maiden in her youth, and the mother in her creative potential, and the crone elder in her wisdom after her blood is no longer flowing. The return of that in whatever form, whatever way that you honor that, is really important right now. We are the architects of what comes next. And it's no accident in my mind that a very well-known Vedic Indian astrologer, sidereal from that ancient tradition, he very clearly laid out that the Kali Yuga ended March 25th, 2025. March 25th, 2025, 3 days after this cycle began. And that doesn't mean that in a heartbeat, everything is wonderful again. We're in that transition. And so much of it now is what we orient to, that we're still upholding the system of oppression through what we put our attention on, through false teachings, through false light, I would say through worshiping the moon, through these old systems that have been seeded for a long time to divert us from the true path. So there's a huge opportunity here to shed, to empty, to miscarry what is false, to honor the truth, the organic, the natural. And we're seeing the other dividing line now with those that are really going all in AI and making AI a bit of a god, a guru, an oracle, and those that are really clear that they want to orient to organic consciousness. And so we're in an accelerated time already. And this cycle can accelerate us even more if we want to release. If we want to see what's not true and release what's not true, then we have this power. Then we're moving into that Libra cycle to find the other sovereign women, to find the kindred spirits, to find the powerful partnerships. If you are single and you want to get into a long-term relationship, I would also say that applies. If you have been searching for that beloved other, this Libra cycle could be a very powerful time for you to finally find that, if you have, well, not if, but correlating to how much you have found your own value, how much you're able to hold yourself and be a sovereign being, because the old model of relationship could be quite dysfunctional and codependent in this distorted realm. So this movement is where we are right now, from the Pisces to the Libra. And once that ends, we're coming back to the original point, the original cycle that began this 8-year journey, and will be in another major 8-year Venus cycle. And when Venus crossed the face of the sun, when we had that in 2004 and 2012 in the tropical zodiac, that was in Gemini, Mercury's sign, the trickster, the monkey mind. Now it's in Taurus, Venus's other side. Do you know how much more supportive the energy of the true zodiac is for what we're trying to accomplish here, which is this resurrection of our souls, no matter how we've been harmed, to feel our own purity and our own power and our own ability to create the new paradigm, the new world, to birth that through our energetic power as feminine beings, as women. I do think there's a biological component here. I know that can itself be controversial, but I do feel like there is a biological component where this is the realm of biological women. So we started in Taurus. Wow. We started in Taurus, not Gemini. And we've gone through this cycle to be arriving in Pisces right now, where Venus is exalted, the feminine is exalted, and then ending in Libra, the other sign that Venus rules, the sign of partnership. So here in Taurus is that reclaiming of our sensual embodied nature, and we're going to return to that again. So this is big, this is important, and that's why I'm coming out of my own challenges and difficulties to really speak to that in the most regulated way that I can, because that's the other dynamic about being here in this realm, is that in order to find that alchemy and activate that and really connect with our power, then we do need to be in a place within our own system where we are calibrated to health, where we are balanced. So there's that Libra balance again. So that balanced energy is really disrupted by trauma. And when we're in a realm that's based on trauma-based mind control, then that can be harder to experience. And yet everything that I've been through, which is a lot, especially this past year, this cycle and this process can help me to find that center again and again and again, without the benefit of having resources for a therapist, having resources for spiritual assistance, although I have tried, I really have tried. That is part of my codes, is that going for the help and not being able to really connect with that too much. I haven't had the ability to have massage, to have friends, to have hugs, all these things that help us to co-regulate. And yet I'm really able to. So as an example of that, I think it's quite powerful, not having an opportunity to rest, in high levels of cortisol stress for this entire year and really the last 3 years. Housing insecurity, the most basic sense of safety, not there. So there's a real power to the movement of this and the rhythm of this that I want to share with you by being vulnerable. And I'm doing that because I think it's easy to project when someone's online, like who they are and their success. And we kind of play into that because we want people to want to engage with our work. We say, don't you want to have what I have? I have done this beautiful thing. If you come to my program, then you will also have a beautiful thing. Well, I'm not able to stand in that kind of position, but I think it's very powerful to show that syncing with Venus has a very real effect on the ground, and it has been such a blessing in my life, not because I'm worshiping Venus at all, but because I'm in that reminder of my own heroine's journey. Every time I see her, it's a check-in. And so the other image I want to share with you before we start to wrap it up here. All right, so this is one of the earlier images I made of the Venus cycle because it just has less detail. And so we can really see that kiss of Venus, or that more of an embrace of Venus and the sun closest to the earth begins the cycle. And then she has the descent, the trials and tribulations in her morning star phase. And she goes through, it's usually 7 gates. This is a little bit stylized for symmetry, but 7 gates into the underworld, and that deepening process when she's behind the sun, because we're here on earth. And then the re-arising as she rises in the truth of who she is and begins to express and take leadership in sharing her gifts and what she's met with through the evening star, and then coming back and starting again. So I do encourage you to get the map and learn the mechanics for sure of this cycle. And I have lots of resources, and those that have sat with me know that I share a lot of resources around the mechanics of the Venus cycle. And I think it is also helpful to come up against our own learning wounds. It took me a long time to understand the cycle. I mean, I have been at this for 14 years. And so women come in and like, oh, this is too confusing, or the astrology. Like, it is helpful to understand your astrology and especially your Venus design, what I call the 5 different elements of your Venus astrology. It's helpful for sure in holding you as you disassemble who you were and become who you are. Like, it's its own holding, it's its own container. That's what I'm trying to transmit here. So even though I didn't have so much holding or connection on the human realm, other than through the internet, like the women that show up with love and support, you have been such sustenance for me in this deep falling away of my relationships in the real and these quests to find my people. So thank you. But to be held by something larger, to be held by something that is cosmic and connecting to the earth, that's what this cycle does. After I had that time when I was 21, when I awakened to the truth of who I was as a being of love, and then that ended, I started studying astrology then too, to understand myself, to understand what cards I was dealt and why I was the way I was. And I went on a path, and I studied Wicca, and I joined a coven, and I went into Native American teachings and into some Hindu Tantra teachings, and ultimately Vajrayana Buddhism. I became a 20-year practitioner of Red Tara, working with what I felt like was feminine power. And so I've been inside, all of these different wisdom traditions, and then naturally, organically through syncing, come out the other side where I am grateful for the truth, but also I see the distortions, and I see the control mechanisms, and I certainly see the abuse. because I have the black moon Lilith, that point of the feminine that is so true, that she will confront the oppressive hierarchy that is on my South node, which is a very powerful point. It means that energy is very strong in my chart. And so I can really trigger that without meaning to, because my Venus is in Libra and I'm in a Venus and Libra cycle. So I have a great desire to balance, and also to, the distortion of that is to people please. And so when that starts to reveal the corruption, and then that starts to have feedback, because whistleblowers who reveal the corruption are generally not cherished in this culture, there's a blowback, and then, having to rebalance from that. But to understand that my Venus is not in Scorpio, my sun is in Scorpio. So that fuel, that energy is going to be about transformation and the rabbit holes and the deeper truth, and, following certain conspiracies to see where they end. And, all of that is very alive for me, but it's more as a fuel. That's what the sun is in the model that I've come to. It is what sustains us, the energy. That's why I tend to want to see what's happening at the belly of the beast, so that can be turned into the beauty through Libra, the balance, the justice. So the justice for the feminine is coming in this next cycle, that justice that we've been sorely missing. And so it feels to me like the more that we shed the old and the lack of truth, and the more that we're willing to let go of what we thought we knew and what we thought we believed. So what is your most cherished belief right now? Like, what would you potentially get in an argument with a family member or someone else about? That probably shows you an area where, what if that got changed? What if that got shed? Who would you be then? And I think that's what this Pisces cycle is asking us, to find those places where we're still clinging to certainty. Because there's one thing that this journey has given me more than anything, is resting in the uncertainty that I don't know. And at the end of those rabbit holes and those conspiracy, sometimes I'm just like, well, I'm coming back again to that I really just don't know. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong to want to know and to go on the quest, but sometimes those actually undo us. And I feel like that's actually the point, more than getting to a new conclusion that now we're going to fight about. No, the earth is really flat, and I'm going to have a whole battle about that now, right? So where are we getting stuck at the level of belief, to not be in that not knowing? Because if the world is that inverted and that distorted, I would wager that we all are holding on to some of that distortion. And so how do we do that level of letting go without sacrificing ourselves and without losing ourselves, that we know who we are at the core? So I'll go more into my codes. I did want to share some more about my codes in contrast to this other woman, Morven. I'm going to bring her on. We're going to do an interview. We're going to riff. We're going to go into our codes. I think it'll be really fun, because I want those of you that have been curious, or especially those that you already have some astrology under your belt, so you can dive in a bit more quickly with this. I do want to show you in a very tangible way how the astrology can help us to orient to the truth of who we are. And then the example of, she is native to this cycle, this unending. She was the one that was posting about the great miscarrying, right? So that's her native cycle. So she was really tuned into that. She was really synced into that. Another woman, Coco, who, you're here as well. You're also been talking about doing nothing. And, I've been really paying attention to those transmissions, especially since I understood this as a Pisces cycle. So, that wisdom of the undoing and the sitting in the not knowing is very potent right now. And to not cleave to even the old stories or the old systems, or just open up the space for what's coming, for what's going to be born. So that is the invitation. And I am going to do a separate little video just showing you all the ways that you can work with me at this time, and highly encourage you, if it's right for you, to lean in, to go ahead and lean in, because Venus wisdom definitely needs the support. This last week, I got fired from my day job with no notice. in an extraordinary turn of events after showing up like a warrior for these women in their business. I could tell you stories. And so I'm very much plunged back into the not knowing myself after doing the practical thing, to stabilize and getting the job. And so, if you are called to support in any way, or, if you have resources and you want to be a patron for creating the calendar for this very important next Libra cycle and helping to get that Venus guidebook. So there's something out there that is written from a woman with lived experience and not just men, if anyone wants to sponsor that, that's totally available. And if you feel called to come into this container, Venus Sisters, I want to create the opposite of what I experienced. I want to create that space where we bond and we share our undoing. And we will be working with journaling. We'll be working with finding a connection on our own land. I'll be bringing the astrology, and we'll really have that. I always find in the Venus Wisdom groups, the women who show up are so magnificent and really real and wise. And so we'll be gathering to share that, but I'm not going to go too much more into it now, because I am 22 minutes over. Coco says we are being asked to take up a receptive stance like never before. Perfect. So that, like, the way that she articulated that, it's another facet of this. And if each of you contemplated it and then came back with your reflection, that's Venus wisdom, right? So I'm giving the provocation, I'm giving the invitation, and then we're each sitting with how that lands, and then we get to express it. And that to me is so gorgeous. All the different ways that we express the truth of who we are. Okay, so I'm going to play you in closing. We're going to close one more song that feels like it's calibrated to this Pisces energy. And if you have any questions or any reflections, if you just want to take a moment, I did, want to do a bit more somatic, but we'll do that next time. Time is time. And just to say in closing as well, that one of the recognitions that I've had in my deep intimacy with this cycle is to understand that time is part of the enslavement here. I mean, that's kind of obvious, but it becomes more obvious. And then looking at Saturn's role in that, perhaps not original Saturn, but I currently see that the planets have been also hijacked and distorted in some ways. And so Saturn's become the controller, and the moon participates in that. They're both together. If you think about time, Saturn and the moon are the rulers of time in this realm. And so I love that the Venus cycle breaks time in a sense, because we can all be syncing with her in this 19 months. And also the 13 breaks the 12. The 12 is a loop that you can never get out of. And the 13 is the rebel that breaks the loop. And so there's a lot about time that is important for our liberation. And just to speak that word into the space, liberation, what is our spiritual journey for? For me, it's always been about liberation, freedom. That's always, because in that time when I was 21 years old, I felt completely free, independent of anything happening on the external. I even had the thought, I was like, I could even go to jail and be in a jail cell, and I would know my freedom. It was the most exquisite experience of this life. And so I know that potential, not as a theory, but as, again, a lived experience. So there's something here about the liberation of how we've been controlled, how we've been programmed, how we've suffered back in through that love, so that we can show up in whatever that puzzle piece is. Our wisdom is one puzzle piece. And then as we begin to move together, we start to put the puzzle pieces together. And I think that's when things really start to change. Okay. I hope that this was helpful. And I hope you'll share with other women who are spiritual women on the path. And if you want to feature me somewhere, feel free to feature me. I will come on any podcast, any interview, and share this wisdom because I feel like it is so important right now for those women on a spiritual path. And also, I've kind of had one hand tied behind my back and one foot tied behind my back. I've been a little hamstrung in my own situation. But I also think it's because of that I've landed on more of the gold. The struggle does tend to do that in the design of this place. Okay. Well, thank you each for showing up. This is a very short song. So I'm going to play this song and again invite you to close your eyes and just listen in to your own heart and your own being and how this resonates. And I hope you will show up in some way in any of the containers, that I've set out to keep going. And thank you for showing up today. But to be in the rhythm of it, we keep returning again and again. And that's when the real magic happens. Oh, thank you. Okay, I think I'm going to share the sound again. Did the sound okay last time? It sounded a little weird to me. Does it sound okay on that song? Yeah, Becky, I'm looking at you. Maybe you didn't hear it. You might have not if you popped in after the song, but let's try.
Abandoned the questioning. I have decided to let myself make peace with uncertainty. And I am better for it. I am better for it. The relinquishing.
Happy relinquishing, beauties. Lots of love to each of you. Take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye. You're so welcome.